Hello, and welcome to the Godless Engineering Interviewing Important People. Um, I am John Gleason, the Godless Engineer. If you'll notice down below, I have some scrolling information there about where you can find me and whatnot. And tonight we are talking with David Fitzgerald. And just to give you a little bit of a background on David, he's an atheist activist, writer, and international public speaker. He was the co-founder and director of the world's first atheist film festival and San Francisco's oldest annual Darwin Day celebration, Evolution Palooza. Today, he works with the Secular Student Alliance and co-runs the Godless Perverts Story Hour. He is also the author of Nailed, 10 Christian Myths That Show Jesus Never Existed at All, and the Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion series. His 2010 book, Nailed, critically examines the historical evidence of Christ, and he is currently working on a follow-up book, Jesus, Mything in Action, which will take on the secular arguments for the historic Jesus. So, let's dive right in. How are you doing tonight, David?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me tonight.
Oh yeah, I'm ecstatic to have you on. Like we were talking about, before the live stream here. I've pretty much been listening to you talk for about the past month nonstop on Nailed, because I'm doing this series on my channel where I present solid arguments against this the idea that there had to be a historic Jesus. So it like I said, it's just really ecstatic I'm really ecstatic to be talking to you. So do you have anything you want to say before we start, with questions and whatnot?
Now let's dive right in.
All right, awesome. Okay, so what religion did you grow up in, or if you did at all?
I did. I sure did. I was raised Southern Baptist, and as we all know, Southern Baptist is the one true faith. And if you ask any Baptist, they'll let you know that. And I was really serious about it too. I was hardcore Baptist all the way up until I was in junior college. I really believed it all the way. I was a total creationist as well. And knew that evolution was all bullshit, and that it had all the good arguments I got from Dwayne Gish and people like that, showing how evolution was just a big joke. And it's kind of funny in hindsight when I think about how freaked out my 15 to 20-year-old self would be if they met my 50-year-old self, or anywhere before that. Because my life has taken such a 180 from what it used to be. I actually was a missionary. I worked at a Cambodian mission in Fresno just before I lost my religion that I deconverted to.
Awesome. Well, I guess. But yeah, I actually have a lot of Southern Baptists that are around me generally, and because I don't know if you know, but I live in North Alabama. Yeah,
and they just fought off Sharia law. I saw. Phew, that was close.
I know, we dodged a bullet on that one. We were so close to passing that.
Ooh, yeah, it was close. Yeah.
But yeah. So you grew up
atheist in northern Alabama, I must say.
Do what?
It must be fun being an atheist in northern Alabama.
yeah. Actually, this week it's been a little tough, just because, like, at work, I'll hear people talking about a lot of religiously oriented stuff, and I've really just had to sit back and just not say anything, because I've said stuff before in the past to my coworkers and whatnot, and it's guaranteed, no matter what, it's going to end in somebody yelling at me.
Oh man. I tell you, my hat is off to all the atheists in the red states out there, especially the ones in the deep south where you guys are. Because, boy, you know why you're atheist. You know why we fight.
Yeah.
We live it every day. I'm surprised you have a tongue at all. You're biting it so much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I eventually had to stop actually taking, taking part in them, because I think, let's see, the last conversation I had, the conversation stopped when he started yelling at me saying, "I don't want no gays in my Boy Scouts." So.
Because that's the exact same thing. Yeah,
exactly. Tell me about. Are there any religious experiences that you had growing up?
Yeah.
You said that you did some missionary work, but
yeah. I mean, I really believed it all the way through. But I wanted to tell you my deconversion story because it's a great story. So, like I said, I was a total Baptist holy roller. Really believed it. Really seriously took it, seriously enough that I was constantly judging everybody secretly in my head. Whenever I met them, it's like, "Oh, you're saved. Oh, you're going to hell. You're saved. You're going to hell." Most of them were going to hell, of course. And the reason it all changed, actually, and this is such a typical Dave Fitzgerald thing, there was a woman involved. There was a girl involved. And in this case, it was my friend Wendy, and she was not a Christian. She was the opposite. She was like one of those Renaissance fair, pagan, Wiccan, woo-woo girls who just, believed 6 different contradictory things before breakfast every day. And we could not be more different. But the way we would flirt with each other is by having theological arguments with each other. And so, long story short, one day we were going back and forth about some topic, some theological topic, the way we always did. And she goes, "Well, Dave, the Hindu religion's like 3,000 years old in Christianity." And I was all set to jump down her case and go, "Oh, no, it's not." But I stopped. And before another word came out of my mouth, I realized, hey, you know what? I have no idea if Christianity's older than Hinduism or not. And that realization that I was about to say something with all conviction that I didn't even know if it was true or not, that blew my mind. I had this bolt from the blue hit me, and it was like, whoa, I'm just like the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons. I'm just repeating what I'd been taught. And it's funny. I mean, a lot of people I talk to, I love hearing people, how their stories about how they deconverted. And for a lot of people like Dan Barker, it was just a long, steady erosion, and it was a bunch of different things. But I mean, I can literally point to like this 1 second I was a Christian, and then a second later, boom, I was not a Christian anymore. It was just that fast. I don't know if you're old enough to know the band Talking Heads and David Byrne.
It doesn't ring a bell. Sorry.
I'm just making myself feel old now. Well, there's a great song, and the lyrics are same as it ever was, same as it ever was. Am I right or am I wrong? My God, what have I done? And I swear that was going through my head that whole afternoon. From that moment on, when I realized that I was just parroting this without any idea whether it was true or not, Christianity immediately felt fake. It never even looked real after that to me. Everything I saw going on, it was just like, this is so obvious that it's just wishful thinking, and it's the self-perpetuating delusion. And a month later, I couldn't even go to church anymore. I just felt like the world's biggest hypocrite because I just didn't believe it anymore at all. It's hard to describe what a weird, earth-shaking thing that was for me, because from that moment on, it wasn't like I'd reached a conclusion or reached an argument. It was like I lost my virginity. It's like suddenly, boom, you know what? That's not coming back. There's just, it's just not there anymore. And suddenly evolution made a lot more sense. Suddenly I didn't feel like I had to judge everybody who came around me, that we all were on the same team. We were all human beings. And I felt connected to them, every person I ever met, and just a part of the universe at large in a way that I never had when I was a Christian. And the ironic thing is that it's so much easier for me to accept people where they are and who they are as an atheist and have this Christ-like concern for them than it ever was when I was a Christian. Very strange. And yet, it's one of those things that I wouldn't trade. You couldn't pay me enough to go back to that old Christianity that I had.
Yeah, I have to say that I really relate to your story because, I mean, it was pretty much like a light switch to me as well, as far as being Christian goes. Because I had a friend who was actually like I guess, Southern, like extreme Southern Baptist, I guess.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And, I was talking to him one night, and he basically, he pulled out a no true Scotsman fallacy on me, which, at the time I didn't know anything about that, but he pretty much
But he basically said, "I guess you were never a real Christian then." Is that what he did?
Well, no, actually, this was still while I considered myself to be Christian. He said that, well, you either take the Bible is the inerrant word of God, or you don't, and you're not really a Christian. And so I was like, well, there's no way that I can admit that the Bible is the inerrant word of God. That's just ridiculous, And so it's like, as it was like a light switch for me, like as far as coming out of Christianity. But it took a lot longer for me to like admit that I was an atheist, because I mean, I don't know. I guess growing up in the South, for one thing, I didn't even know atheist was an option, and then
right, yeah.
And then another thing is that I had always, I guess I had always been kind of subtly taught that not believing in God was bad. And so if I sat there and I was going to be like, okay, I don't believe in God anymore, I was going to be damn sure that I was certain that I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I mean, honestly, just like you, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I even
in hindsight, doesn't it seem obvious? Doesn't it feel obvious to you that that Christianity was bullshit?
Oh yeah, completely.
Don't you feel? Yeah.
Well, you see, because I actually grew up Catholic.
Ooh, that must have been fun.
Yeah, and I grew up Catholic, and I even went to a Catholic private school, and everything. Yeah, like I remember one time I said "suck" in class, and I had to write "I will not say suck" 100 times, which I guess is better than getting rapped on my knuckles or something with a ruler. But anyways, so I grew up Catholic and went to a Catholic private school, and even then, like, I could pick up like on the bullshit, stories and whatnot. Like I caught on to like the good moral things, like what you normally hear cherry picking Christians say.
Sure.
I was able to pick up on those things, but then there were other things, like Noah and his boat and other things like that. And I was just like, oh, okay. At the time I was a kid. I was like, yeah, I watched Power Rangers. Of course this happened.
And I always like spent so much time compartmentalizing things. Like, I was a huge dinosaur fan. I still am, for that matter. But as a kid, and yet, compartmentalizing that the Earth is millions of years old and dinosaurs are over here, and that the Bible says the Earth is 6,000 years old over here, and getting those two things to work simultaneously, the cognitive dissonance was interesting. But I'm always jealous of people, like a lot of women I've dated. They were raised fundamentalist or Catholic or Mormon or what have it, and it just never took with them at all. They just never bought into it for a minute. And I always feel kind of envious to them for that, because I totally fell for it hook, line, and sinker until I was way old enough to know better.
Oh yeah, the same thing with me too. Because growing up and being put into a Catholic private school and everything like that, I had, I of course had family members that were like, duh, believe in God, and all that kind of stuff. And then I also had the authority figures at the school that were pretty much saying the same thing. And like I remember one early memory that I have. I think I was in like the second grade at this school, but like I was curious about how the Catholic preacher or pastor or whatever they call him, priest. I was curious as to how his garb felt, like his little garb. So like we had to go every single Friday and Sunday to mass. right? And so one Friday at mass, I like just reached out real quick and touched it and came back, and then like I got scolded when I got back to class. I was like, come on, ah.
That's the hem of his robe. Yeah. Have you ever seen that monologue that Julia Sweeney does, Letting Go of God?
No, I'm gonna have to look that up now.
I think you'll love it because she starts as a good Catholic schoolgirl, Irish Catholic schoolgirl, and it just shows her whole arc from going to that to all these different spiritual searching she does and winding up atheist, and it's just awesome. You'll love it and you'll relate to it.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out after after this interview. So the did it take you long to like admit that you were an atheist, or did you come into that quickly?
You know what? It didn't take me long to admit it to myself. I mean, I instantly felt it. I instantly knew it was. It took a long time for me to get over that and process it. I can remember for like the first year or so going from this Christian who felt like I had this magic shield of protection around me, keeping me from all harm, and God had a plan for me, and I didn't have to worry about nothing because God had my back, and realizing that none of that was true. And I remember distinctly, I had the feeling like I had been flying in a plane at 10,000 feet or so, and that the bottom had completely dropped off, and yet I was still flying. And I remember thinking things like, well, what's keeping me up? What's, now that I've lost that protection, how am I still going? How am I still moving through things? For like a year or so, it was tough. There was an adjustment period, I would say. But it was really, as far as knowing that I was an atheist, boom, it was like instantly, oh yeah, this is just not happening anymore. I can't be that anymore.
So I guess that would mean that you didn't really investigate like other faiths or anything like that, or
yeah. Well, to be honest with you, it never even crossed my mind that any of them would be any more real than Christianity. In fact, in hindsight, I think that was part of the problem, is that I was really good at telling why Mormons were all going to hell, and really good at telling why Jehovah's Witnesses, fill in the blank, all these different religions were wrong and evolution was wrong. So none of those guys seemed any more enticing to me than my own. Baptists believe they're the most skeptical of Christians, and I didn't even believe what Baptists believe anymore. So yeah, none of those seemed appealing to me at all, and they still don't, for that matter. Atheism just is much better fit for me. And like I said, I instantly felt so much more connected to everybody and the universe as a whole. And I was able to let go of so much judgmental baggage, just letting go of having to compartmentalize like my love of science fiction with, having to cram all of reality into this tiny Southern Baptist shaped box. Getting rid of that, boom, it's like there's no way in hell I'm going to cram the whole universe into any other tiny little box either. You couldn't pay me. Couldn't pay me to do it.
Yeah, me either. So like, did you have any like family members or any close friends that gave you crap after that or anything?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I never really talked to my folks about it at the time. I just stopped going to church. And then about a year after that, I guess I moved in with my girlfriend. So to me, it seemed really obvious that something was wrong with Dave and I was not on board with Christianity anymore. And yet, when I finally sat down with them, I was getting ready to move to San Francisco. And I said, you know what? I don't know why I haven't done this, but I'm just going to, they know it already, but I'll go ahead and tell them anyway. And I just sat them down and said, I'm not a Christian anymore. And they were like, what? They just did not see it coming. And I just assumed that, everyone knew because I stopped going to church abruptly and moved and was living in sin with my girlfriend. It seemed like those two things would be hit in half, but no, it really wasn't.
Yeah. Funny that you kind of bring that up because I remember when me and my wife, then she was my girlfriend as well. We moved in together, and I had my mom and my sister over, and my sister was like, "Oh, John, where's your bed?" I'm like, I don't. That's my bed, and that's her bed. So put two and two together, there, Emily.
How did she take it?
Oh, she was just like, oh, Okay, and
Oh,
she had
yeah,
that kind of attitude about it.
yeah.
But I know that see, I haven't actually talked to my mom in about 2 years or so. We had
Oh, wow.
a pretty hard falling out, and I
Yeah,
know even then, like my atheism, like when we were having our last fights, my atheism came up, and she just had
yeah,
like little small shots to dole
yeah,
out at me, which
yeah,
she's actually a Lutheran now.
yeah.
It's been
Oh,
kind of yeah, it's been kind of interesting because like we started off as Catholic because that's what my dad was or is,
yeah.
and then after my mom and dad got divorced, we
You
went through a
become,
period of like not really going to church or anything like that, and then it's like all of a sudden we got back into church and we were Baptists or something like that, and I know,
yes,
and
a
then we
lot of
fell
people.
out again, and then it's like
Oh no.
it's like for me, like I was looking back on it now because they always say that hindsight's 2020. Um,
Sure.
Looking back on it now, like I was really struggling to like actually be a good Christian or good Southern boy, and trying to like go to church and because I'm like I know I need to go to church. I'm going to hell because I checked out that girl's ass the other day. I really
Right.
just need to go and just be a good Christian. And so looking back, like ever since high school, I had been trying to force myself into going to church and doing all those kind of things, and it just never really felt right to me. Like I never wanted to be there, and like anything that they said, it just was like in one ear out the other, kind of thing. And so and so there was a pretty, I guess now that I think about it, there's a long process of me falling out of it completely. But like I said before, it was really just a light switch once somebody said the right combination of words.
Isn't that wild? Yeah. It always fascinates me because everybody's story is different. Nobody leaves Christianity the same way, which I find fascinating. It's like thumbprints.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. That's what really got me interested in doing all these interviews with people talking about their religious history and background and whatnot. Um,
Yeah.
Before we go on to talk about your books, was there anything like in your childhood, and I didn't really talk to you about this before, but was there anything in your childhood that you could really deem as being, I guess, harmful as far as religiously?
Yeah, I mean, my attitude, I mean, I was like you in a lot of ways that I wanted to be the good guy, I wanted to be the good kid, and I got a lot of self-worth out of, my teachers liking me and my parents liking me and being smart about religion. But like you said, when you feel like you're going to go to hell for checking out that girl's ass, that was a big problem with me, and that was a huge divide is the way religion like co-ops natural functions like the sex drive and makes it a bad thing. It's this instant, you are instantly on the hook, you are guilty. They've got you for life once they got you feeling bad about the things that turn you on. Um, and that's probably the most insidious thing I can think of. That and also the way it makes you satisfied with already having the answers. Like, oh no, you don't need to look out there. We've got all the answers right here. And anything that's not outside, everything that's not inside this little bitty box right here, that's bad. And that's bad. And we shouldn't have anything to do with it. And we have to make fun of it and disdain it, In hindsight, that drives me crazy.
Yeah, I know it drove me crazy too. Just because I mean there was that aspect of it for me, but there was also like any time that I felt ill will against somebody or whatnot, I thought that I was going to be going to hell. And any time during that period where I was kind of struggling to go like back to church and be that good Christian boy, anytime
Yeah.
anybody asked me like, well, do you think that you're going to be going to heaven or hell? Like I remember getting that question so many times and getting duped
Huh.
into like getting back into church or whatnot because
Yeah.
it's like, well, I don't know if I'll be going to hell or heaven. And at the time I hadn't really been taught like a lot of the intricacies of the faith.
Mm.
It's just general cherry picking stuff. So,
Yeah.
when I was in school, they didn't teach you that the heaven as depicted by the Bible, is really just blind servitude and and everything like that. And so
Like
they did.
Chris said, a celestial North Korea.
Yeah, exactly. And I had always painted this like really happy-go-lucky picture of being in heaven or whatnot, and like that. And for me, at least, that was actually another bit of harmful thing because I was actually recently diagnosed with both PTSD and clinical depression,
Oh
and
man.
and so like I remember growing up, like I would feel so much shame, that I would just be on my bed crying, begging God for whatever, and whatnot, and it really did, I guess I always feel like it religion, at least Christianity, really helps hide like mental disease
Illness.
or illness. Yeah, it really helps hide it because you got this socially acceptable layer of bullcrap that is kind of like a shield, like a cloak of invisibility for it, and so that was in hindsight that I kind of recognize that, but
That's really amazing that you made that point because yeah, I think you're totally right, and I've never put those two things together that exactly that way before. But yeah, it does harbor. I mean, when you see, I'm not saying all religious people are crazy, but an awful lot of crazy people are religious, and you can see how that religion, those mental constructs in their brain are not doing them any favors. They're just making it worse for them.
yeah, I totally agree. And like just to pull in some recent events, like with Leela Alcorn. I don't know if you've kept
Yes.
up.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I think that that if the parents didn't have that indoctrination going on with them, that they might have been a little bit more open to Leela's situation, how she was feeling and whatnot, and then they wouldn't have went on social media and everything afterwards and totally just
Yeah.
disrespected her after she died. Um,
And you could say that's the whole history of gay, lesbians, bi, transgender people and religion. It's like, for me, that's a huge argument against God right there. The fact that these people are here and religion has nothing good to say about them. That's a hit and a half that religion is bullshit right there. We got a dead zone. Can you still hear
Sorry.
me?
No, sorry. Yeah, I forgot to unmute myself, or yeah, unmute myself. So, but no, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Um, but I guess let's get into your books though. Talking about
Yeah.
that. So first one up is Nailed, which, like I said before, I've been listening to, on repeat for the past month. But I'm kind of curious, what got you interested in doing that kind of research? Like, what motivated you at first?
It's very funny. It's ironic. 15 years ago, it never even crossed my mind that there might not be a Jesus. Never, never for a moment. I'd been an atheist, perfectly happy atheist for 16 years. And one day, I'll tell you what it was actually. I read a book called Kin's Guide to the Bible. Hilarious book. I recommend it to anybody. Read it, and one of the things that cracked me up about it was how it talked about how Jesus is different in each of the Gospels. And like, you have commie Jesus and you have fat Jesus, and it made me wonder. It made me laugh actually, but it also made me wonder. Okay, which of these is the real Jesus, and which is the one that's just been made up later by Christians after the fact? And so I was really curious to know if we could look into the evidence for Jesus and parse out, what was the real Jesus and what was the legendary creation that came later. Um, and that's where my troubles began, because almost immediately all these red flags came up. First of all, like saying, "Oh wait, this is all the evidence we got. This is it. That's it." And these are mostly just the four gospels, and the four gospels aren't really written by the guys we said they were, and they were written much later than the time they portray. and they're all actually based on the first gospel. It was just like domino after domino for me, where it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. And then, I mean, long story short, 2 years down the line, I'm thinking, I don't think this guy even existed at all. I mean, there's nothing irrational, there's nothing crazy about the idea that Jesus was just a guy. But when I look at our evidence, I just don't see how that's possible. As you know, I've got a chapter in the book towards the end called Can Jesus Be Saved?, where I talk about all the things that I think would be different even if there had just been a normal human Jesus. But yeah, I just don't see it based on what we have.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on, of course, every single point in the book. It just, well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and I love in the book how you really pull from a lot of different sources to really back up what you're saying and whatnot. So that's the reason why I've actually been using that as my main source material for the videos that I've been doing.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because I really did try to. I mean, none of these were my ideas. I mean, maybe 3 ideas in the whole book were mine. Other than that, this is all that's not even new stuff for the most part. And people all across the theological spectrum were saying the same things. And when I first realized that other people were questioning that Jesus exists at all, it just blew my mind. Just blew my mind.
Yeah.
And still does, for that matter.
Well, yeah, it blows my mind every time, I kind of have these conversations because, for about the past month or so, I've been having like nonstop arguments with people, which surprisingly enough, they always end up mad. Like, how dare you question whether or not Jesus existed?
Yeah, and I expect that from the Christians. Of course they're going to say that. What else could they say? But when you get it from our fellow atheists, it's like, it's not just they disagree with you. That's fine. That's nothing new. That's nothing special. But they get so mad. All their crackpot, all their conspiracy theory alarms go off, and they lump it in with, Holocaust denial and vaccination, anti-vaxxing. It's just all the venom they store up for bullshit things. Jesus myth sets off all those alarms for them, and it's like, phew, after 15 years, I've kind of had a belly full of dealing with them, which is why I'm writing a follow-up book to Nailed right now.
Yes, Jesus Mything in Action, which I just cannot wait to read. Just because I'm kind of curious to see which arguments, that you address and that I have personally had to try to deal with. And whenever I bring up, whenever I question Jesus's historicity, which I actually, I think, I know a little while ago I messaged you over Facebook because, I had done a video where I kind of point out how Pilate, is totally misrepresented in the Bible, and
totally,
yeah, and it is just not how he would actually act as the Bible depicts it. And like, I actually got the argument like, well, Jesus is about as real as Pilate, or there's as much evidence for Pilate as there is for Jesus. And I'm like,
what's funny? Yeah, I was gonna say, I hear that for lots of people, like Alexander the Great or Socrates, and it's like, you know what? Even if there really was a Jesus, there's no way in hell we have better evidence for him than anybody else. It's like, we have horrible evidence for Jesus, whether he existed or not. Yeah.
Oh,
that's a
yeah.
terrible.
Yeah, and one thing that I've kind of been pointing out has been like, at what point do you still call somebody, this Jesus character?
Right.
Because, a lot of people want to reduce, the person that started Christianity down to like just this total nobody that not even Superman could fly around the earth several times, go back in time and find him, basically. Yeah. And I just get that argument so much, and it's just like, well, okay, at what point do you really accredit him with starting Christianity when
right.
He could just be some Joe Blow on the street that just started talking a bunch of stuff, and then other people ran off with it,
Well, and I get that a lot too, and for me, there's like, the reason I don't think he was a stealth Messiah is all the 4 Gospels, and those are our only source for him, they are all, first of all, they don't agree on who he was, but even worse than that, they're all based off Mark's gospel, the original gospel, and they are taking it in other directions for their own reasons. And his original gospel, the one that really, all our biographical information stems ultimately from Mark's gospel, it doesn't read like it's a biography. It reads like it's an allegory. And many historians have broken down how every single facet of his story, from start to finish, even the mundane sounding things, are literary constructions. They're not based on oral history. They're not based on eyewitness testimony. They don't claim to be. They are a literary construction. It's an allegorical Jesus. And that's my biggest problem with, there's nothing unbelievable about the thought there could have been a Jesus. I mean, there were lots of figures like him, but as I mentioned at the end of Nailed, the paradox for me is that either this guy did all these amazing things, or at least taught these amazing revolutionary things, and yet no one outside his fringe cult notices for over 100 years, or he didn't do these things. He didn't teach these amazing things. He was just one more Joe Blow preacher out there. And yet as soon as he's dead, you've got all these feuding little cultlets, not just in Judea, but in Syria, in Egypt, in Greece, in Rome, in Asia Minor, all scattered around the Roman Empire, and they can't agree about the first thing about his career or who his family was or who his friends were. It's just that perfect storm of how can you have this paradox if there was a real Jesus behind it?
Yeah.
And not only that, just one more point, sorry to cut you off, but not only that, but even in Paul's letters and in the New Testament itself, you see people talking about these other Jesuses and these other Christs and these other gospels that are being, so like, where are those coming from if there's supposed to be a real Jesus behind all this?
That's easy, David. Fan fiction. Just really horrible fan fiction. Actually,
you know what? You're not far off either. You're not far from the truth.
But living in the South, I have my fair share of I guess evangelical people that I see, and
Sure.
and I talk to, and I have to say that I usually have to stifle my laughter whenever somebody tells me that the Gospels are completely historical, and then generally after that they when I bring up, well, they differ so much, how do you reconcile that? And they always say, well, it's told from different
are true.
yeah, well, there's that,
but
but then there's like, well, they're told from different perspectives, and so that's why they're different. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, but
no, they're not. They're not. They're cut and pasting most of the time.
yeah,
That's the thing. It's like they either match verbatim or they go off in completely incompatible ways. It's like, it's not, well, I was there and I saw Jesus do this. It's no, this guy named Matthew is stealing the story from Mark and just pumping it up and making corrections to it.
yeah.
Don't get me started.
I know the thing that I referenced and the last time that this got brought up was, I was like, okay, if you're gonna say that the Gospels are just different perspectives, that's basically like somebody seeing a murder, and this one guy is like, oh yeah, that guy shot that guy, and then the other guy next to him is like, no, an angel came out of heaven and then pointed his finger at the guy and his head exploded. And
Right.
it's like those aren't two different perspectives. You have reality, and then you have this crazy hallucination this guy had, which is kind of what it seems like to me. And I have to say that I can't count the number of times I've used John's Jesus is the Republican Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. John is so different from the other three gospels. It's amazing it made the cut at all. And of course, there were lots of gospels out there that were even more popular than our gospels. They didn't make the cut, like the Gospel of Peter. We're lucky we have the Gospel of Mark at all, because even in ancient times, Christians thought that it was like a synopsis of Mark or Luke, and they thought it was an abridged version of that. And so we're lucky to have it at all. But if we didn't have it, it would be so less obvious how that story evolved and keeps evolving through Christianity.
Yeah, yeah. But Oh,
Another thought occurred to me. Actually, one more thought occurred to me is like, I talk a lot about the historicity of Jesus and how I don't think there could have been a real Jesus. But if you're going to be talking to your average evangelical guy on the street, I don't really recommend that be your starting point, because that is just too big a pill for most Christians to swallow.
oh,
I think it's better to say, well, how reliable are these gospels, and point out reasons why you don't think they are reliable.
yeah.
Because I mean, saying there's no Jesus, that's a hard sell even for some atheists. Believe you me.
Oh, no, yeah, I know.
Uh,
I've gotten my fair share of angry arguments over this. But no, actually, the average evangelical that I was talking to on the street, I actually wasn't talking about any of that. Like if I ever do mention it, like when I'm talking to those types of Christians,
yeah.
I just kind of casually mention, well, I don't really think Jesus even existed. Like I don't even try to go into proving it just because
Yeah.
I mean I've heard all the Christian arguments for it or whatnot, and honestly I'm not impressed, um but
And,
oh
and honestly, whatever you say about Jesus, whether you think he existed or didn't exist, or what you think he did, it all boils down to our sources for him, and that's where that's really the crux of it for me, is that we all should be at least agnostic about Jesus, because we don't have any good, strong historical footing for anything that happens in the Gospels. And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but everything that we have seems to point the other direction, that this gospel that we have, just looking at the way Christianity is before the Gospels are written and looking at the way Christianity is after the Gospels are written, are two different complete animals. And I talk about that in the book too. That's a hint and a half that there's something very strange going on with Jesus' biography. But again, it seems much more plausible that Mark was written as an allegory. That's something in Nailed. Nailed, I spent a lot of time. I was mad at Christians being so smug about, oh, we have such good evidence for Jesus, that I said, no, we really don't. And I listed the top 10 ways that it just fails the reality test. But what I didn't do in Nailed was talk about how I think Christianity did start. And in fact, I should have made more of a difference between the Jesus of faith, which I was going after in there, and the real Jesus, the historical Jesus. Because all the arguments for the real Jesus, they're even worse for the Jesus of faith. It's like, yeah, if we can't even believe this guy existed as a preacher, we know it. We don't have any good reason to believe that he did miracles and rose from the dead and raised people and had earthquakes and angels flying around. But that's what I do in the new book. I actually go the other route and talk about why I don't think there was a Jesus, and this is how I think Christianity started.
well I know or at least for me, I think you kind of did touch on it a little bit.
Well,
Um,
a little bit. That's one of the criticisms I get, and so I'm trying to do a better job of pointing that out in the new book. And I think and I do, and but really, again, it's the same thing. These are not my ideas. These are not even new ideas. I'm quoting a lot of people. And here's another thing. Let me just go down another rabbit hole while I'm at it. A lot of the crap I get from atheists is like saying, well, what makes you think that you're right and every single other biblical historian is wrong? It's like, well, for the most part, mythicists like me, we don't think everybody's completely wrong. We agree with all of them when they're saying, oh, you know what, this criteria doesn't work for Jesus. Jesus studies has been a total cluster for a long time, and even Bible-believing Christian historians have admitted as much. And I have lots of case histories in the new book where I talk about how biblical historians are forced to toe the theological line, and they get smacked down if they step anywhere near that for things that are far less blasphemous than saying that Jesus didn't exist at all. So there's a whole thing. It kind of was the tail wagging the dog in the book, because the first third of the book is talking about how Jesus studies themselves. We're not talking about evolution here. We're not talking about climate change. We are talking about biblical history. There's nothing in biblical history that's proven with any kind of certainty that we have in the physical sciences at all. at all. And people need to know that these aren't, Christians in lab coats doing high quality science work. These are mostly theologians working from reverse engineering and trying to make it seem like there's good evidence for their Jesus.
Yeah, I've kind of noticed that a little bit with Christian arguments. They try to start from the end and then work their way towards the beginning, as if that were to like validate, their
Right.
Jesus or whatnot.
And saying things like, "Oh, all historians agree, 99.999 of all historians agree there was a Jesus," that's bullshit from the get-go, because if you ask anything about that, it immediately divides into, well, all the secular Jesuses, secular historians, their Jesus, of course, is nothing like your Jesus. So it's like, no one believes in your Jesus over there, Christians, that consensus breaks down immediately once you start trying anything about who founded Christianity.
I find it really funny when people that I have an argument with about the historical Jesus, they usually try to latch on to like the most minutest thing, and like,
you mean historical details that it gets right?
No, like for instance, in the one video that I did where I discuss the important dates that we don't have for Jesus, I accidentally said that there was a 3 days of darkness after he died instead of a 3 hours in the video.
Yeah.
I didn't catch it until afterwards, and so I just put an annotation up there. But they would latch on to that. Yeah, they would latch on to it and be like, well, I'm not even going to address your video because, you completely lied right there. And I'm just like, no, I didn't lie. I just misspoke. Yes. And whether or not it was 3 days or 3 hours, there was still this mysterious darkness that there's no record of anywhere.
3 hours of mysterious darkness that even covers just a region, let alone all the land. That, people would not have missed that. We would know about that if that happened. That's one of the biggies.
Yeah.
And examples like that can be multiplied all over the place too. Sure.
Yeah, and I actually come into a lot of arguments that are basically just arguments from authority, like saying like, well, which I know is something that you just taught or spoke on, but just basically saying, well, all historians agree that there was a Jesus or blah blah blah.
Oh, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, such bullshit. Such bullshit.
Yeah. Well, actually, to kind of move forward a little bit, I would actually kind of like to hear your opinion on Atwell. Atwill.
Atwell. I try not to bag on other historians I disagree with so well, but I don't even count him as a historian. His whole thing, for people who don't know, Joseph Atwill has this idea. The Caesar's Messiah was a book of his, and the idea is so. Here's the thing: it's if you have to be smart enough to even concoct this crazy story, you should already be smart enough to know why it's a complete non-starter. What he argues is that Christianity was this Roman invention, this big conspiracy to create this religion that was pro-Roman and would turn the Jews into happy Roman citizens, and that Josephus basically wrote all the Gospels, and Constantine, it varies. You hear variations on this depending on which author's saying it, but Joseph Atwill most recently is the one who's been flouting this, and it's like, you are crazy. That is just crazy buckets of crazy. It's so wrong. Christianity, we see its evolution. We see how it came out of this blend of Hellenism and Judaism, and going on even probably before the first century. We really don't have a firm idea of when Christianity started for sure. But it started well before Josephus was even born, let alone before he wrote any of that. And I know anybody who's actually read the Gospels or knows anything about how they disagree with each other and the ways they disagree with each other, the idea that one guy wrote all of them, that's just crazy bullshit. It's like, how would that even work? Yeah. Anyway, so there's that. There's that.
Yeah. Well, I remember when Atwell or Atwill, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, but I remember when he first came out with his news about all of that. I know a lot of people went crazy, and and you know. Honestly, at first, I mean, I didn't really have an opinion on his
Yeah.
particular thing, just because it's like, well, I don't really, I haven't read it or anything, and plus,
Just going by the headlines, it seems reasonable enough. There's reason that Jesus didn't exist, but yeah, when you dig a little further, it's like you don't have to go too much further. Where it's like, oh, okay, whoop, 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 stop the train. We're going to Crete town.
yeah, it really does kind of seem like it's just like one big conspiracy theory of like the Constantine era.
Ridiculous proportions. And you know what? Let's talk a little about conspiracy theory too, because one thing that's a constant thing thrown back at mythicists is that we are like creationism for atheists. We have no evidence. We're bucking the system. We're bucking the consensus. And we complain that there's a conspiracy theory keeping it down. Well, I've never heard any mythicists complain about a conspiracy theory, period. But if you want to, it's funny when you hear creationists, the things they complain about evolution and about the sciences, mistreating them. Not only is that not true, but in the case of Jesus myth, or in the case of any Jesus history theory that doesn't match what they want it to match, they do the exact same thing. They will go out of their way to stifle it, to make sure it doesn't get promoted. I mean, look at Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman is a staunch historist. He's sure there is a Jesus, and he was at best a failed apocalyptic prophet. And when he just told the truth about the state of biblical studies in Misquoting Jesus and in Jesus Interrupted, awesome books. Look at what they did. They didn't say he was wrong. They didn't say he was saying things that were untrue. They said, no, we're not keeping this under wraps. We're not. They went all over his case and gave him such a ration of shit for it. And he was saying nothing that they couldn't agree with. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, I've actually came across Bart Ehrman, multiple times in discussions that I've had with like atheists, and like I'm just kind of curious. I know I actually listened to your appearance on the Thinking Atheist, and talking about how his his historical look at Jesus was kind of a bad book.
And let me say something about that real fast, because I'm a huge Bart Ehrman fan. I love the man. We didn't hate that book because we expected him to agree with us. We hated that book because we thought this was going to be the best defense of historicity. We thought it was going to take on all the crappy mythicist things like Atwill out there and clear out all the deadwood. And instead, it seemed like he just phoned it in. The books he's done since then, Forgery and Counterforgery, brilliant books, excellent books. I'm just started reading his book right now, From Jesus to God. And so far, I'm like 20 pages in, and I disagree with almost nothing he says in there. So it's not that we have an axe to grind against Ehrman, but I am disappointed, A, that it was just not up to his usual standards, and B, that his reaction to criticism has been so bad. And I know it's not an easy thing to be criticized by somebody like Rick Carrier, but this isn't a feud between historicists and mythicists. It's a fight between those who take the theory serious, whether it's true or not, whether they agree with it or not, and those who just dismiss it out of hand. And that's something that I think needs to be emphasized. There's lots of people out there who are historicists, but they say, I'm at least agnostic on the possibility there may have been no Jesus. And in fact, there's more of those than are willing to go public with it, because I know for a fact, because they've said so, that their job depends on them towing a certain theological line. Even secular historians come to this point, where their job actually depends on them being contractually obligated to not take this theory seriously. What can I say? And again, I document a lot of that in the book as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, that kind of gets me. Being contractually obligated to adhere to some kind of theological position on it.
And that's on the Christian side. I know there's a lot of good secular historians out there, like Bart Ehrman, that aren't bound by that. But even almost every secular historian I know of comes out of a religious background, and so they're already weighted with all these presuppositions and these assumptions that some things are fact that aren't proven fact, in fact have been shown to not be factual. Biblical studies over and over again, we get these paradigm shifts where today's blasphemy is tomorrow's consensus opinion, and I give examples of that in the new book too. That 30 years ago, when Thomas Thompson was saying that the patriarchs weren't historical, I mean, he nearly got his career derailed before that even started. Now that's the majority opinion. Now that's not even controversial. I'm hoping that Jesus myth will have that same kind of evolution down the line. But to be honest with you, I'm not very optimistic about that, for the simple reason that this is kryptonite for Christianity. You can, as a Christian, you can deal with evolution. You can deal with climate change. You can wrap your faith to make room for that. You can't really do that with Jesus myth theory.
Well, I don't know about that, David, because I've recently learned about I don't know if it's a new religion or whatnot, but it's called Christian atheists.
Oh dear, tell me about that.
Yeah, it's come up in my group before. Basically they adhere to the idea that Jesus was a moral teacher or something like that, and so that they really. Basically, they're cherry-picking Christians, but they don't actually believe in the divineness, of Jesus or any of that.
Are they Unitarians or something, or what? That's fascinating to me. It's like I don't know. That's like black Republicans or Christian heavy metal bands. It's like, pick a side already. Why would you do that to yourself?
No, yeah, I know. It really got me too, because when somebody first mentioned it, I was like, "Wait, what?" And I actually looked it up, and it I found a Wikipedia article about it, of course, and I read up on it a little bit, and I'm like, "You're kidding me! There's no way! What is this?"
Thomas Jefferson would have probably approved of that. He was the one that went through the Bible and cut out, "Oh, this is clearly bullshit. Didn't ever happen, but this is some good stuff."
Yeah, I gotta say that book was probably about the thinnest book as far as the Bible goes.
That's funny.
Oh,
I remember.
Sorry,
go ahead.
You go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I was in a bookstore one time and I saw a book called The Positive Bible, and they'd gone in and taken all the good parts of the Bible and left out all the bad parts. And that was my first thought. I said, wow, this is a thin book. This is a lot smaller than our Bible. I wonder how big the negative Bible would be. That's all I got. I think we got another mute issue.
Oh, crap. Sorry.
Yeah, what were you saying?
We've got a number of people watching right now. We got about 10 people watching live. But one of them actually has a question.
I have some questions.
Yeah. So the question is, David, what is your take on Mark 14:51 that Jesus was gay, or something like that?
Here's the thing. You have to be real to be gay. But honestly, I don't think that if you just took it from a story standpoint, there is a gospel called the Secret Gospel of Mark that was discovered by Morton Smith, or maybe it was forged by Morton Smith. I'm just saying. And he has a scene where at the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus is arrested, this mysterious boy runs away. Somebody grabs his robe and he runs away naked. There's a little naked boy in the Garden of Gethsemane. In the secret Gospel of Mark, that boy is basically Jesus' boyfriend, and Jesus stays with him all night and loves him and teaches him the mysteries of heaven. Bow chicka wow wow. You know,
that's a weird way to refer to statutory rape, I guess.
Right. But honestly, I don't think any of the gospel stories that we know of portray Jesus as having sex with anybody, because the early Christians, there's much better evidence that the early Christians were anti-sex than they were pro-sex, for the most part. I mean, there's always exceptions, but for the most part, most of what we thought of as Christian sex, they didn't even think men and women who were married to each other should have sex. You know, and the evidence we have for people thinking other ways may just be rival factions accusing other factions of having orgies and eating babies and that kind of thing.
Wait, eating babies? Are we talking about atheists now?
No, we're talking about Christian. Yeah, right. But yeah, those kind of things were thrown back and forth for heretical groups towards each other. Yeah. There's even Gnostic Gospels where Jesus has sex with Mary. That's not too freaky deaky, I guess.
Well, is that a Gnostic Gospel, or is that a Dan Brown book?
Yeah, right. I'm actually careful about using the word Gnostic, because Gnostic, it's a modern idea, basically. I mean, Gnostics didn't consider themselves Gnostics; they considered themselves Christians, and so it's very hard to say what Gnostics were and weren't, because it was such a free-form thing. You know, it's not very useful as a term, and so I'm trying to steer away from that. But the fact is, there were lots of different Gospels and Acts and Christian writings, and not all of them reflect the same theology that we think of as Christianity by a long shot.
Yeah. I actually haven't been able to read all of, or any really of the the Nag Hammadi library.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to read much of it or any of it really, but
you don't really have to. They're pretty dull stuff, to be honest with you. But actually, there is one that you should at least read the first page of, and I'll tell you that there's two Gospels in the Nag Hammadi library. One's called something like the Blessings of Eustanos, and the other is called the Sophia, or the Wisdom of Jesus Christ. And the reason I say read those two is because the Wisdom of Jesus Christ is unfinished. It's only half finished. And when you read both of them, you can see that whoever started writing this Jesus Christ gospel, they're taking this pagan gospel, Eustanos, and everything that he says to his followers is being turned into a gospel where Jesus says it to Matthew, and Matthew and Peter ask blah, blah, blah. It's literally being cut and pasted being turned into a Christian gospel. It's fascinating. It's a total smoking gun that's what they were doing back in the 3rd century, as late as the 3rd century.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But most of those gospels, they're just bizarre-ass things to read. I mean, they don't even read like Christian. It shows how weird our Christian scriptures are to somebody who's not a Christian and hasn't had their Sunday school teacher say, well, this really means this and this really means this. When you actually read these things cold, it's like you don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's probably why I haven't really read them. Is just because I don't know. It's got to be really interesting in order to catch my attention, really. And
they are.
Well, and I mean, yeah. I guess that's really why your book caught my attention enough for me to not only get the audiobook but also the Kindle version as well, and the physical version. And
you know what, Joe, I think we should all do that. Actually, I think you set a great example there. I think that it works better that way. If we all every version of David's books.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, we haven't said anything about the Mormon books. Actually, all the Christians who hated Nailed, they loved my Mormon book, so go figure.
Well, yeah, actually, I was just about to move on to that one. The the Mormons, which is actually the first book in a series that you're doing on Western religions, and I have to say, I owe I think it was your presentation at the Skepticon that you presented this book at. I owe your presentation on that one. I owe that a lot because I made one of my best memes that I posted on my page that's been stolen and reposted so many times, and it was basically a recount of Joseph Smith. Like, as he's held for trial in Bainbridge, New York, and for doing these things with the seer stones and whatnot, and then he turns around just a few months later and he creates an entire religion using seer stones.
Boom. Yep. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. I swear. Yeah. That Mormonism is honestly, whatever you want to say about Mormonism, it is fascinating. It would make such an awesome miniseries made for cable. It's just full of sex and violence. The early years of Mormonism. It would be awesome.
Well, I can agree with that because just listening to the first little bit of like Joseph Smith's history, it just sounds so fantastical. Just like, it sounds like any other cult that you would think of like now, because it's like, oh yeah, God told me that you're gonna be my wife, and he's talking to like a 9-year-old girl.
Yeah, 12-year-old girl. Yeah. And the irony of that is she wasn't his wife. It was like 9 years later they hooked up when she was married to somebody else. Yeah.
Let's see. I hope you'll take some pride in this, but a lot of that information that you presented just in your speech alone at the Skepticon gave me enough ammunition to get a Mormon to admit that he sounds crazy.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
you have to send me these memes. Actually, that would be awesome.
Okay, yeah. Because I did one. I did that one that I was talking about, but also the Cain, I think, is actually Bigfoot.
Oh,
that one went over
Bigfoot,
well.
Yeah. I'll bet. That was one of those things that when I first read it, I thought, wow, that's cool. But in my heart of hearts, I really didn't think anybody actually really did believe it. I just thought it was one of those wacky doodle things. But people came up to me afterwards and said, yeah, my grandma used to tell us that story. It's like they really did believe that. Wild.
Well, actually, right around the time when I was doing a lot of looking into the Mormon faith or whatnot, and kind of getting your book, apparently that's when the Mormons came by, right? And apparently they're allowed to have cell phones, at least to get like text messages from headquarters. And so they were like, yeah, we just got this text message saying that you had visited the site recently, the website. And I'm like, I haven't been on. The Mormons have a website? I don't even. and so it's just like, wow, either somebody's playing a horrible joke on me, or the higher ups at the Mormon High Council is totally lying to their boys that they send around. But no, I got the Mormons to come back 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah,
what was it that made them say, yeah, that does sound crazy?
Let's see. They were talking about how they know that their faith is true. The
burning in the bosom.
Yeah, they were talking about how they know their faith is true and whatnot. And so I point out, like, okay, how do you explain other people of different faiths feeling the exact same thing as you do? Because that's they do that out there. And he's just like, well, I just really pray to God, and I really feel it when I'm praying with him, and I'm sounding crazy.
Well, good for you. I mean, that's awesome that you can actually lead him to make that leap himself,
Well, yeah, it did.
He'll probably be on the show in a year or two. Yeah.
It did get a little scary, though, I have to admit, because we started talking about like free will at one point, and I was talking to him. I was like, "Do you really think that you have the capacity to bring a gun here today and shoot me in the face?" And he was like, "Well, yes, of course I do." And I'm like, I was like, "Calm down, John. Don't go running. don't go running just yet. And so like I just reinforced him. I was like, you don't really seem like the kind of guy that would just blatantly kill somebody, in cold blood. And so I just kind of I really moved away from that subject quick.
But I hope that stuck with him, and I hope that eats at him even longer, and that because it's arguments like that, it's discussions like that worked on me. So you never know what's going to change their mind. So you could have done a good thing.
Well, yeah.
Play to you.
Yeah, well, hopefully, like I really tried to get them to really think about their faith, while I am kind of caustic while on my page or whatnot, that a lot of people think that's just how I am in real life, but it's really not, because my page is really just an outlet for me. And then when I'm actually in a discussion, I usually I'm really I usually try to go for like a real logic based route, going at them and whatnot.
Right.
But anyways,
what's about food? I was gonna say, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong in an argument like that. It will make so much more of an impact if they get that you care about them in the first place, and that you care about what you believe is true or not, and that you have reasons, and you're curious to see what their reasons are for what they believe. I think that approach, that sympathetic, compassionate approach, does so much more than knowing, the Book of Mormon like the back of your hand and knowing all the right arguments. It's so much better just to be yourself. So hats off to you. I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
And I think your mic's still muted.
Yeah. But actually, just to kind of compare it, and I guess brag about myself a little bit more, we had some Jehovah's Witnesses actually come up, and it was a couple women. And I pointed out how they're fine with people that get divorced and remarry, but yet they won't allow homosexuals in their congregation or whatnot. And I point out the flaw there. But then I also spent a lot of time discussing with them about how the Bible's misogynistic. And how,
nice.
and pointing out, the Bible says this about women, or the Bible says that about women, and trying to get them to think. But one girl was young and looked like she was just kind of heading into her career as a Jehovah's Witness, but the other woman just had one of those shit-eating grins on her face and was just nodding. And it was like, oh, okay, I see. You're an atheist. Well,
nothing's going in. Bing, bing. La 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 la! I can't hear you. La la la. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, about your Mormon book, I actually haven't been able to read it all the way through yet. But do you want to tell a little bit about that? Just like I guess a teaser for people.
What? I just happen to have one right here, John. Here it is. The Mormons. There you go. It's sort of 1/3 secret history of Mormon and their origins and how it's even more mind-blowing than you think, and another third talking about all their bizarre beliefs, that is a kind of cornucopia of all the strangest things they believe, and then the final part is like what to do if you bump into Mormons, how to talk to them when they knock at your door, that kind of thing. And it was a fun book to write, actually. It's a fun book to read, and I think it's probably my most popular thing I've written overall. I've gotten lots of great press from ex-Mormons, especially. That really warms my heart, that they appreciate all the research that went into it, and that they learned things that they didn't know about their own church growing up. One of my best the stories I love to tell is this guy who was a Mormon for 35 years, became an ex-Mormon, wrote a 6-volume series on Mormonism, wrote to me and said, this book is awesome. I learned stuff in here from your book. And that just made my day, made my whole year. And the other thing is, it's a book that you could buy for your Christian friends, and they'll appreciate it just as much as you will, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually always fall back on something that Sam Harris said actually, and that's that Mormonism is crazier than Christianity because it's Christianity plus some really bad ideas.
I call in the book I call it steampunk Scientology. Um, yeah.
Well, do you in the book do you go into the actual faiths or beliefs of Mormons? Like, do you cover that at all?
Oh, yeah.
Or
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
uh,
I mean, at the end of the book, I say that I didn't finish this book. I had to stop writing this book because otherwise it would be an encyclopedia. 'Cause there's just too much fun stuff to say about their weird history, all the strange skeletons rattling around the closet, and and just it's a cornucopia of crazy. It just never stops. Um, it was just it's a very fun read, very fun read. Yeah.
um, well, one thing that I do have to ask is the underwear part of the Mormons. Now,
Right.
I had made an image a while back and got a lot of heat on it because it said it said basically that Mormons wear magic underwear. And I'm just kind of curious. I was told that that actually isn't true or whatnot,
Well,
but
yeah, they will not thank you for calling it that. Yeah, never tell a Mormon magic underwear because that instantly that will stop your conversation right there. They call them temple endowments, and they're sacred, not secret. They're sacred. Um, and they all of Mormons have great stories about how their cousin was on his mission in Bogota, and there was a drive-by, and the bullets were stopped by his underwear, or somebody was in a house fire and it burned everywhere except where the underwear was touching, So they take their temple endowments very seriously. Um,
I,
yeah.
I have to kind of relate because there's this particular type of athletic wear called Under Armour, and
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember a story. I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe if it was just a joke, but apparently somebody had worn it and gotten shot. And,
Huh.
and like because it was called Under Armour, and he was like, "Oh,
Oh, no.
look, you can't hurt me,"
Oh,
but
no.
and so I could just see that out of a Mormon being like, "Oh, I'm wearing my sacred temple garments. Go
Funny.
ahead, Cletus, shoot me."
Funny. I don't know if it's still around, but when I wrote the book, there was a website called Mormon Secret that you could buy your own set of Mormon underwear for kinky sex parties and Mormon bashing, and apparently it was actually made by people who used to make Mormon underwear, so it was really made according to the actual time-honored uh, traditions, and it has all the sacred symbols carved into it. Uh,
Well, ironically, actually, I remember finding a website that sells like I guess newer modern sacred garments, and like they had both female and male versions, and it's just like looking at the website, I'm like, wait a second, is this a Poe website? This has to be a Poe.
Yeah, but apparently there are lots of different styles, including camo for people in the army and things like that.
Or
One of
Duck
the things I
Dynasty.
remember, yeah, one of the things I remember best about when Mitt Romney was running for president is there were times when he was wearing a white shirt at a press conference, and you could totally see his underwear underneath the shirt.
Well, David, that I mean, he was just trying to secure his seat in in the White House by wearing those garments.
And isn't it bizarre to think that the leader of the free world could have been a guy who believed in magic underwear? I mean, we had two Mormons running for president, and one of them even wasn't that crazy. John Huntsman, I think, probably wouldn't have been a bad president for a Republican. Much better than Romney. Yeah, bizarre, bizarre.
What about Kolob? And the reason why I bring up Kolob is because when I was talking with the Mormons that came to my door, they said that that was kind of like like a fringe kind of thing.
Well, it's funny. Collab's one of those things that they don't like to talk about, and it's cotton out. The genie's out of the bottle. But when you like dial in on 1-800 Ask a Mormon or those chat lines, you'll get different answers from them. At least I've found that you get different answers from them, and they'll be a little cagey about it. They don't want to say, sometimes they'll say, oh, that's the star closest to heaven or something like that. But they won't say, well, that's the planet that God lives on, and that if you go and become a really super good Mormon, you'll get your own Kolob-like planet and be able to live on that and start your own universes off.
I guess a super good Mormon is one that's white and not black.
No. Since 1978, they can be super good Mormons too.
Oh, can they? Did God change his mind or something?
It's official. Yeah. No racism there. Nope. Yeah. But Kolob, the funny thing about Kolob, some of this confusion about whether it's a star or a planet stems from the fact that Brigham Young and Joseph Smith didn't seem to realize there was a difference between a star and a planet. There's a great sermon that Brigham Young gives where he says, talking about the people who live on the moon that Joseph Smith preached about, where he says, do we think people lived on the sun? Well, yeah, no question about it. Why would you go to waste? Of course, it's not, it's not there for no reason. There's people that live on it. And he said that every planet, once it becomes celestialized, it will become a star too. So apparently Earth, once Earth becomes celestialized, whatever that means, it will turn into a sun and give off light in the universe. And until that, it'll be opaque. So it's kind of crazy, the bizarre science theories that got spun out of Mormonism.
I think the scientific community would have a problem with with the Earth turning into a star.
There are some awesome quotes on Mormon science and Mormon science fiction in the book. Not to toot my own horn too well, but those are some of my favorite parts. Is just listening to the smug satisfaction as they spout off on the people on the moon dress in the Quaker style and live to about 1,000 years old, just perfectly authoritative. Oh yeah, sure. Cracks me up.
So what other books or what other religions are you going to check out in your series here?
Right. Eventually, I'm going to do one on the Jehovah's Witnesses. Before that, I'm going to do, I don't know if you've seen my talk on YouTube, the Sex and Violence in the Bible talk. It's called Sexy Violence, Violent Sex, the Weird-Ass Morality of the Bible.
Yep,
that's the next. After Jesus Mything in Action, that'll be the second book. The third book will be Sex and Violence, and then I'll probably do Jehovah's Witnesses. So I've got about 5 or 6 books in the pipeline, kind of jostling for position right now. But I really want to be careful with this book right now, because this book I'm taking arguments I get from atheists. And so I want to really make sure that it's really well documented. It's got all the footnotes. It's like, if you disagree with it, don't take it up with me. Take it up with these guys here. And I'm not the only one saying this. So it's slow going, but I think when it comes out, I'm going to be really proud of it. Yeah.
Okay, so you're currently writing up the Jesus Mything in Action right now.
That's right. I'm probably just a little over 2/3 done with that.
Okay, cool. I cannot wait to read that, just because of my interactions with people and the arguments. So I always love hearing how other people like to argue against points, because it's kind of like finding your way around town. You can always find like 20 different ways, but some ways are obviously better than others. And
well said. And again, I don't blame any atheist who doesn't think that Jesus myth. I get that that's a hard sell, and this book is going to be written for all the atheists who are trying to make that argument, and that need ammo for why we have reason to doubt that there was Jesus at all. And for me, I mean, I'm at the point where there's just no way this guy existed. Not because I think it's a ridiculous idea that he could have existed, or that's irrational or unreasonable, but when I see the way everything came together, I'm convinced. And so this book will hopefully do a good job of giving atheists who feel that way something to work with, or at least to reach out to other atheists who don't see that way. And again, at the end of the day, it's not really an important argument. It doesn't make any difference for the most part whether there was a Jesus or not. I mean, I'll be just as happy an atheist if it turned out there was an overrated apocalyptic prophet named Jesus in the first century. I just don't think that's where the evidence is pointing, and it's worth talking about for what it's worth.
Yeah.
If in that Jesus is important at all, it's worth talking about.
Well, my position on that aspect of it, like whether or not Jesus is worth talking about, or discussing his historicity, I typically bring up the fact that he is used as an excuse for a lot of horrible shit that occurs.
For sure.
Because kids are getting kicked out of their homes. Because of their Christian beliefs, and obviously with Leela Alcorn, she committed suicide. There's a lot of people out there that are being spoon-fed this idea about Jesus, about this perfect person. And I don't know if you were taught this growing up, but I was kind of taught well, you should try to be like Jesus, that should be your role model. You need to be just perfect. And it's you can't get more perfect than a fictional character, And
that's for sure.
And so that was another thing that I kind of struggled with growing up, because it's Jesus would be better than this or something like that. I was constantly comparing myself to Jesus.
Yeah, that's a recipe for constant guilt 24/7, isn't it?
Yeah. And let's see, we're actually coming up on about 5 minutes left, which I have to say I've just loved this entire discussion with you, David.
Same here.
Yeah. Well, I kind of wanted to touch on the most recent current events, being Charlie Hebdo. Je suis Charlie. I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on the matter.
I mean, I happened to have a bout of insomnia the night it happened, so I got the news almost in real time from a friend of mine in France while I was working on the book at 3 a.m. our time. And it really bothered me. Anytime you see fundamentalist reaction on this level, it bothers me, because that could have been me. That could have been Dave Silverman. That could have been Dan Barker, Greta Christina. Any of us who are out there. It could have been John Gleason, who are putting ourselves out there as atheists. When they go after somebody like that, they're going after all of us. And it really drives me crazy to see right wing talk about how, they brought it on themselves, they wore a slutty dress, and so we're asking for it. That just drives me up the wall. It's Salman Rushdie satanic verses all over again.
Yeah, and just to kind of reference for people, actually, Bill Donahue has used that exact tactic when dealing with this situation, saying that the cartoonists actually kind of, I guess, brought it on themselves, they themselves are to blame, which is completely ridiculous. And
it is. And you know what? Fuck Bill Donahue. It's I don't know why anybody takes the Catholic League seriously. There is no Catholic League. It's that joker, from his mother's basement or wherever the hell he spouts his crap. It's I don't understand why anyone takes him more seriously than they do their crazy uncle at Christmas time. Yeah.
Well, with him being ridiculous Catholic, it's probably more like crazy drunk uncle.
There you go.
Well, okay. Well, at least that's how my family was.
Let me end on this one note, because that is horrific. But here's the thing: overall, we are winning. Atheism is winning. Doesn't feel like that all the time, but the world is getting better all the time in all kinds of ways, all over the world. Right now, in America itself, the college generation, the generation who's in college now, 5 years ago, it was the highest. Now, let me get this straight. It was the least religious generation in human history. That was 5 years ago. Now it's even higher. Now the current college level is almost evenly split across the board between openly religious, secular, spiritual but not religious, and openly secular. And those numbers just keep going up and up for us. So for us, the world is getting a better place, and this is a great time to be an atheist. The flip side of that is that as more and more people, the more rational and the more reasonable people who are believers become atheists, and they are, and it continues, and it's not going to stop, what's left is the crazy core of nutty whack job fundamentalists who are at the center of that. Those are going to be the last to go. So stuff like this, it's going to get uglier and worse before it gets better. But man, don't ever think it's not going to get better. It's getting better all across America. It's getting better in the Muslim world. It's getting better in the heathen world, in the third world, anywhere where religion is getting challenged, and it's getting challenged all over the place thanks to the internet. We've got a lot to be thankful for, and we've got a lot of work to do, and it's a great time to be out there doing it.
I couldn't agree more. Well, and I guess here's one question that I've always kind of thought about asking, more atheists with more notoriety than me. How do you feel about like the online community, like as far as not necessarily Facebook pages, but like just the online community in general for atheists and I guess fighting against religious indoctrination?
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it's the best thing about the internet is that any atheist around the world, no matter where they are, whether they're in some Islamic hellhole or whether they're in the middle of New York City or Alabama, northern Alabama even, they're not alone anymore. They're connected to every single other atheist on the world. And they can, if you're a Christian, you can fact check your preacher in real time right from the pew and say, oh, how about that? He just said something that's not true. That's huge. That's a deal breaker. That's a game changer. And every day, Fox News loses another visitor, another viewer to senility or the grave, but we get another atheist. And those numbers, theirs keep going down, ours keeps going up. And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
No, I don't either, especially with the fact that, that a lot of these studies that have come out, have really kind of created this new category called the nuns, where it's just people are not affiliated with a religion. And to be honest, as I'm having more of these conversations about how people have coming out of their faith, that just kind of indicates to me that, these people that have stopped going to church or don't really consider themselves, religious or whatnot, that they're really getting out of that coached mindset of it, of approaching the Bible.
It's huge. And imagine what's going to be like when the Republicans realize that there's more atheists and nuns than there are Tea Party members. Boom, when they start saying, oh, we have to pay lip service now to Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye the Science Guy, not so much Jesus, That's going to change things big time. It's already starting to change.
Yeah.
Already starting.
And to end on kind of a really good note, and I hope this makes you feel really good, David, but on my last Did Jesus Exist episode, I actually talked with somebody that had been following it and said that my videos, based on pretty much your work, got them to investigate further into it and turn them into, a mythicist, basically. Saying that, yeah.
Communism.
Yeah, so not only did you kind of turn my opinion against it, but I'm turning opinions using your research, which is just fantastic.
Awesome. That is awesome. And you know what? At the end of the day, if somebody comes up with better evidence that Jesus wasn't a myth, I want to hear it. If I'm wrong, I want to know. So, but that's awesome to hear. I love that. That's really great.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that a lot of religious people don't get, because they're in this, they've been indoctrinated with this mindset that you stick to your beliefs and that's what you have. That they don't really have this concept of being able to change your beliefs with new information.
Absolutely. And what they think is like science's greatest weakness is science's greatest strength. It's like, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If it's not true, we don't hang on to it for no good reason.
Exactly. Well, we're actually just a little bit over time, but like I said, I think this was a great conversation, and I'm really fortunate to be able to have this with you. But are there
Right,
any? What was that?
right back at you, John. Thanks so much for having me.
Is there anything that you really want to kind of plug? Let people know where to find you at and whatnot.
Um, yeah, thanks for that. Probably the easiest way to find me is on Facebook. I've kind of maxed out on friends, but you can follow me on Facebook, and that's the easiest way to shoot me a question or that. At some point this year, if I sit down long enough, I'll try to get a website together. But for now, Facebook's the best way to do it. And yeah, if you like what things we're talking about, yeah, please go out and buy my books and books like me, like from Richard Carrier and Robert Price and Earl Doherty and Frank Zindler. And there's a lot of good stuff out there, and a lot of good podcasts and blogs like this one. So, yeah, go to it.
Well, I guess a little bit of a self promotion for me. I know you don't know, but I'm actually an engineer. I have a bachelor's in computer engineering and a master's in software engineering. And yeah, or at least that's what I've been studying for the past couple of years.
Gotcha.
Which includes a lot of graphics work, apparently. But no, I was just going to say that I also specialize in website design and whatnot. So if you get to the point of needing a website, I hope you'll keep me in mind for helping you out with that.
Excellent.
Yeah. But if you want to check out my work, my handiwork as far as website design goes for anybody out there, as well as David, godlessengineering.com is up with a blog and all that good stuff, videos as well. So I implore everybody to go and check that out. I'm pretty proud of it because I built it from scratch, and
That's awesome.
yeah. But as well for me, just sort of signing off here, I would like everybody to subscribe below under Secular TV, but you can also find me on Godless Engineer on YouTube, as well as Godless Engineering on Facebook. I also have a pretty big group. We just passed 10,000 members recently, and yeah.
Congrats.
Thanks. And so just go in there and type in Godless Engineering into the search bar. You'll be able to find all of the groups and the page and everything like that. But that'll wrap it up for this interview with David. Again, just reiterating, I loved having you here, and I'm really glad that you could join me tonight. And I hope you have a good night.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for everybody watching. Thanks again, and I'd love to come back another time.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely have to have you on again once your Mythicist book gets put out, and any other time.
For sure. All right. Thanks again, John. Good night, all.
Good night, everybody.